Welcome to toy-polloi.
Hello and welcome to another video from toy-polloi, and in today's video we're going to be taking a look at repainting the Origins version of Skeletor's face to make him look more like the classic version of Skeletor. Right from when I got the first Origins Skeletor figure, I thought the figures were great, but the faces really didn't do him justice. The first figure that was released was this version, where we have Skeletor with his mouth open, sort of leering out, and I thought it was a reasonable sculpt, but it just sort of didn't do it for me, especially as I like to buy a few Skeletors, and if you've got a few of these together it looks really odd. They then issued this version of Skeletor where they updated the face sculpt, and it certainly looked better, but it still doesn't quite look like the Skeletor I remember. So today what I'm going to be doing is taking this version of Skeletor, we'll be repainting him and trying to make him look as close to the vintage version of Skeletor as we possibly can. So why do I have a problem with this Skeletor? Well, it's not really that I have a problem with him, it's just it doesn't look like Skeletor to me. This is how Skeletor looks. As you can see, he's got a quite sort of evil looking face. He's got fairly sort of sad eyes and just a few teeth there at the front. And this is the sort of classic version of Skeletor that I remember from my childhood. And when they've redone him for the Origins line, you can see they're getting close to that, but they've made his eyes a lot more evil. They've given him far too many teeth, and his face doesn't particularly look like a skull anymore. I think that's because of the way they've painted him. They've basically painted all of his face this sort of greeny yellow colour, and they've not put any of the detailing in. You can see here around his jaw, they've got sort of little dark patches just to really make him look like a skull. We're also missing a few things like the little lines between the head, and generally it's sort of a close version to Skeletor, but it's just not close enough. And I think with a little bit of repainting, this face sculpt can be made to look almost exactly like this version of Skeletor, and then for me I would have the perfect version of Skeletor. Now really this face isn't that bad, it actually doesn't look too bad, and there have certainly been other versions of Skeletor that are far worse than this one. Let me bring in an example. Here we have the Super 7 version of the Battle Armor version of Skeletor, and I think this is possibly one of the worst versions of Skeletor that is available. Just look at his face, that doesn't look anything like Skeletor. I'm not quite even sure why that got through quality control. It's just a terrible version. So this modern version from Mattel really isn't too bad. I just want to take it that little bit further and to see if we can actually turn it into this version of Skeletor. So I've bought myself another version, because at the moment you can pick these up fairly cheap. There are a lot of shops selling them off. They obviously bought far too many of them, can't shift them, so you can pick them up pretty cheap. So I've bought myself another Skeletor, and this is the one that we're going to be painting. So let's open this up and then get some paints out and see what we can do. The overall shape of this head isn't bad at all. I think it's actually pretty close. It's just the paint application that means it doesn't look like this vintage Skeletor. So the first thing we need to do, I think, is to paint some of this dark sort of bluey purple on just around either side of his mouth, because you can see on the original Skeletor the face shape isn't round. They've basically made the face shape round on this one, and it isn't. It needs some indent. So we'll do that by painting some sort of dark blue into those gaps. I'm going to try and match the colour of the hood, because that's, you know, what's done on here. The hood, although, is a little bit lighter on this one, so I may just sort of darken it down a bit, but I'll paint those in, and that should start to sort of sort the shape out. You can see as well he's got too many teeth. There's only 3 teeth on this Skeletor. We've got a line in the middle and then 1 either side, and on this one I think there's 3 on that side and 4 on that side, so I'm going to simplify those down. Then also I'm going to change the shape of the eyes. We'll put some lines between his eyes, sort out his nose as well, just generally doing a more accurate paint job. So first thing then, let me mix up some paint that's a sort of darker colour. I'm not going to be too precious about how this goes in, because I am going to be over painting it with this green and the yellow of his main face. So I just need to fill in those gaps enough that then when I sort of come to paint the top coat on, we will cover that up. So let's get those bits painted anyway, and that will be the start of this process. paint. Well, there you go. You can see I've just very roughly painted that in, and immediately that makes a massive difference to how Skeletor looks. He's starting to look a lot more like Skeletor. Just changing that little bit of the shape of the face really does make a big difference. So I'll let this blue dry, and then we can sort of start doing the lighter colours. But you can see I've painted it on quite scruffily. It's really sort of gone all over the place. It's just that overall look, it just makes him look completely different. I can see actually looking at this that maybe I need to put a little bit more around his chin as well, just to bring his chin in. So let me do that, and then yeah, that will just be a case of letting it dry, and we can then put some of the other paints on. But it's such a sort of massive difference already, just that little bit of colour there, just to give him a little bit more of a shape to his face. I think this is what Mattel should have done when they came to paint him. And as for the colours I've chosen, I've had to mix a few because I don't have anything that is this sort of exact blue. So I've used this game colour, which is 72.022, which is called Ultramarine Blue. To that I've added some violet, which is 70.960. This is a Vallejo model colour, that one. And then just a little bit of black as well, just to tone it down. But I can immediately see that this is going to work. This is going to make a massive difference to how this figure looks. So the next thing we need to do is to start putting these sort of darker green around the edge. If we look at this original Skeletor I have here, you can see we've got a sort of darker green around the top and around his chin. So that's what I'm going to be painting on. I've already mixed up the paint, and it's the same paint ratio that I use when I repaint a normal Skeletor. So we have some olive green, we've got some flat yellow, and then a little bit of blue added to that, and it gives you the right sort of colour. Check out my original video on repainting Skeletor, and you'll see all of the paint mixes that I use, but that's the same colour I'm using here. So let's get to carefully painting these new patches on around the side of his face, and we'll really make him look like a proper Skeletor. So at this stage I pretty much could leave it as it is, because you can see what a big difference just making those minor changes has made to the face. It's now really looking like Skeletor. In fact, if I bring in my original Skeletor here, you can see it's got a much closer look to that original figure, but I want to take it that one step further. So I'm now going to repaint the yellow parts of his face, and then I'm going to repaint his eyes to give them a slightly sort of sadder look that he's got here. These eyes look a little bit too evil, and these are a lot sad. So let's get the yellow painted on. I've already mixed it up. It's again a mix of the two colours I previously used. So we have this yellow here, flat yellow, and I've just mixed in a small amount of this olive green, and that gives you a nice colour that is about the right shade to match this. So let me get on and get this all painted, then we'll start putting his eyes on. But you can see what a big difference just a few minor little paint applications has made to this. I'm not sure why Mattel didn't bother to actually paint this face properly, because you can see with little effort you can get a very good result. Right, so there's the yellow painted on. I've also gone to the effort of painting the eyes. That is not a black that I've used there, it's the same sort of mix that I used for the sides of his mouth. So it's a dark blue with just an extra little bit of black in, just to make it a little bit darker. And I haven't bothered repainting his mouth. Basically I've painted over the bits of his mouth that shouldn't be there. So I've now left it so that there are 3 sort of vertical lines and a little bit of a horizontal line. If we look at the one on the left, you can see how many teeth he has and how many I've removed. It really does make a big difference. So that head is almost there. In fact, if I bring in my original Skeletor now, you can see how close that is looking. It's really starting to look like Skeletor. I've done a little bit more shaping to it just to make it look a little bit more skull-like, but the overall effect is that really does look like Skeletor. What we're missing though is these little red eyes, so I'm just going to paint those in. I've got a red here which is called Bloody Red, which is a game colour, and I've mixed in a little bit of black. So if I just paint in those eyes, we can let everything dry. Then I'll give it a clear top coat of a spray with a satin gloss finish just to sort of tidy everything up. But I think that's going to look a whole lot better. So yeah, let's get these eyes painted on. There you go, the eyes have been added. I've done them a lot more subtle than the ones that are on the Mattel version. These are just too bright for me. I think the overall effect you want is just a little bit of a sort of red glow in the background. Every Skeletor is subtly different, and I've been chatting with a friend of mine, Uncle He-Man, who collects a lot of He-Man figures, and he sent me some photos of some he has, and they are completely different to the ones I've got. So there is no sort of one size fits all way of doing this. But I just think overall the paint scheme that Mattel did really undersold what this figure should be. Making the face look more like a skull really makes a massive difference. I'm going to let this dry now, and then I'm going to give it a clear top coat with some semi-gloss spray. We'll put it on the figure and I'll show you all of them side by side so you can make your own decisions as to which one looks best. But I think I know already which one I'm most happy with. And there we go, that's with the clear coat added. And I also took the time to add the 2 little lines between his eyes there, the sort of frown lines, I suppose. The Mattel version, the modern Mattel version from the Origins, doesn't have those at all, which is a real omission, because it really does give that final little bit of character there to Skeletor. So this is now ready to put back on the body, so I'll bring in the Origins body here and we can just push that on. It should click in place. I think that's clicked in place, so there we go. There is an Origins version of Skeletor, but with a more classic version of the face painted on, and it does make a massive difference. So there we go, that's all it takes to take this Origins version of Skeletor and make him look more like the original version of Skeletor that we have here. I really wish that Mattel had gone to this effort and just doing a decent paint job on him. The first face, I don't know, it has some character and it's started to grow on me sort of since I've had it, but this second version that was supposed to look like an original version of Skeletor just never looked like it. And it really wasn't the fault of the sculpt. The sculpt is not bad at all. It's just how it had been painted, and as I've shown here, with a little bit of paint you can turn that into that, and it really makes a massive difference. I do wish Mattel had spent a lot more time sort of looking at this when they made this figure, and in fact if they'd asked I would have happily given them some advice on what to do. So maybe in future, this is an open offer to Mattel, if you want to ask me before you release a figure, get in touch. My contact details are all over my YouTube channel, so just get in touch, ask me a question and I'll give you an answer, because I think something like this really isn't that hard to do, and it wouldn't have cost you any more money because it's using exactly the same amount of paint applications as this figure used. So there you go, that's all you need to do to turn this figure into a really nice looking version of Skeletor. If you've enjoyed this video, then make sure to check out some of my other Masters of the Universe projects and restorations that I've done over the years. Make sure to give me a sub and tap the bell to be notified each time I upload a new video, and thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching toy-polloi. Subscribe for more great videos. You can also follow toy-polloi on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.